Question for you. When you tack up your horse, is your horse girthy? Do they pen their ears back and maybe even try to turn back and give you a nip? Well, guess what? You might not have a training problem. Your horse might have ulcers. I know, scary, right? Okay, here's the actual scary part. Most horses that have ulcers don't actually appear to be sick at all. Today, I'm going to talk about what stomach ulcers are, why modern horses seem to get them constantly, why wild horses didn't really struggle with this, not fair, I know, and exactly what to do about it. What the heck are stomach ulcers? Sounds kind of gross. Well, it kind of is. Let's break it down. So a stomach ulcer is literally an erosion in your horse's stomach. It's an unhealing wound that just so happens to be in the lining of your horse's stomach. Pretty nasty. Here's the deal. Horses produce stomach acid 24 hours a day, not just when they're eating, all the time. And a horse's stomach is split up into two different regions. So the upper 2/3 have a lining called a squamous region. This region is not very protective against the horse's stomach acid. The bottom third, however, is doing all the heavy lifting. This is the glandular region. And this bottom third of the stomach is what's protecting your horse from getting ulcers. Now, most stomach ulcers, also known as gastric ulcers, occur in the region where you don't have that thick, strong antacid lining. So in the upper 2/3 region, because they're just not really doing much up there to protect your horse's stomach from the acid. Not very nice. They're slacking off. Now you might be wondering, why would horses only have this protective barrier on the bottom portion of the stomach and not the entire stomach like humans have? Well, back in the day when horses were left to roam and do whatever the heck they wanted, they had to constantly move in search of food. So they never really stayed put. They never really got big meals. And the meals they were getting weren't very starchy or high in carbs. They were very fibrous, but they were never eating a ton until modern day. Horses back in the day, they didn't really get ulcers. That is the modern horse's problem. Because nowadays, horses are kept in stalls. They're not walking 30 miles a day constantly looking for food. If they're out in pasture at all, it's usually a pretty small pasture with readily available grass and a bunch of hay. And we're also feeding horses grain. The wild horses didn't get grain. So now their stomachs are full, much more full than they were in the wild. So that upper portion of the stomach, that stomach acid is overproducing to try to digest all that feed, and it is corroding the lining of your horse's stomach. The modern horse also, many of them are not getting fed a constant supply of food throughout the day. They're fed usually a couple of large meals in the day. Maybe if they're lucky, they'll get another one midday. This means their stomachs are going for prolonged periods of time without any food. So their stomachs are empty. Just because the stomach's empty doesn't mean that the stomach acid stops producing. Wouldn't that be nice if you could just be like, hey, we're all done up here. We just had breakfast, you can stop. The stomach lining doesn't hear that. The stomach lining doesn't care that your horse has just had breakfast and isn't gonna eat for another 6 hours. They're just focused on their job, eyes on the prize. They are tasked with producing stomach acid continuously, and boy, are they doing it. As you can imagine, a lot of horses that get ulcers get them continuously because it's just a lifestyle that they have. So much so that there's actually a name for this condition. It's called equine gastric ulcer syndrome. I know, pretty creative, right? And get this, horses that are under a lot of stress, such as race horses or performance horses, they have a much higher incidence of experiencing gastric ulcers. Depending on the discipline, anywhere from 60 to 90% of performance horses, when endoscoped, were diagnosed with gastric ulcers. Yeah, that many. Now think about it. Performance horses are usually fed large amounts of food. They're kept in stalls. They're fed grain to give them enough calories to complete the tasks that we're expecting them to do. And that might have a little something to do with why it happens to them all the time. A lot of times you can't even see the symptoms. You cannot tell that your horse has ulcers. The only way to positively diagnose ulcers with certainty is to have a camera put down your horse's esophagus and into the stomach and visualize the ulcers. But because it's expensive, pretty invasive, and not super practical, we also diagnose based off of symptoms. So here's some symptoms to look out for because a lot of people miss these. The symptoms, they're not always dramatic, okay? Ulcers, in fact, tend to be subtle, but common signs include girthiness, of course. If your horse is experiencing attitude changes, they're suddenly performing poorly, not at their usual level. They may experience weight loss if their ulcers are severe enough and causing them that much pain. They start to associate, hey, every time I eat, my stomach hurts, so sometimes they'll lose weight. It affects their nutrient absorption, so a lot of them will have dull coats. They can have mild colic episodes, because think about it, horses who are prone to getting ulcers are the horses that are standing still, like horses that are stalled. And when you're standing still, it also slows gut motility, so kind of a double whammy there for those horses. Your horse might be grinding their teeth to cope with this pain, and of course, having a reduced appetite. But you know what the most common symptom of ulcers is owners saying, I don't know, they're just acting different. Something's off. And there's not any obvious reason. There's nothing obviously wrong with the horse. They don't know why the horse has suddenly changed, but they have. So every time I hear this, I think, maybe your horse has ulcers. And then we ask them about the horse's day-to-day lifestyle, exercise routine, feeding schedule, feeding plan, the whole thing. And horses that are under a lot of stress, such as performance horses or lesson horses, or horses that are being weaned, the stress hormones that get released actually trigger more stomach acid to be produced. Poor horse, you're stressed out, and on top of that, you get a stomach ache. It's the perfect storm. Something I see a lot of is horse owners treating their horse for ulcers based off of symptoms, because stomach ulcers are so common with horses. I will say, giving your horse medication to treat ulcers, fine. In fact, it's great to be taking an initiative and doing something about your horse's ulcers, but you can't just give them medication and think, that's all I need to do, my job is done. Actually, you will need to be changing what's causing these ulcers. You're going to have to address the cause. What's going on in your horse's life that's making your horse have gastric ulcers? Your management plan needs to be revamped, because otherwise your horse is going to just keep having ulcers. Your horse is going to be in pain. They'll be unhappy. You'll be unhappy, because ulcer medication is not cheap. So just address the issue. Let's not use a Band-Aid. So the gold standard treatment for gastric ulcers is omeprazole, which is an antacid. It's a human medication, but we also use it in the veterinary field. The horse-specific omeprazole approved for equine use is called GastroGuard. It's sold everywhere because so many horses have them. And it works by reducing the amount of acid that the stomach lining is producing so that the stomach can heal, because the stomach acid prevents those ulcers from healing. The treatment for GastroGuard, it's usually 28 days, sometimes longer if the ulcers are that bad. But here's where a lot of horse owners go wrong. They treat, the horse improves, and then they go right back to the same management. The thing that caused the horse to have ulcers in the first place has not been addressed, has not been changed. So then the horse gets ulcers again, they buy medication again, and it's a cycle. So as you can imagine, prevention is key. They say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of treatment, and boy, is that true. That is so true, especially with gastric ulcers. So starting with forage, make sure your horse has 24/7 access to forage. They should not be going long periods without hay. Their stomach should not be left empty for hours. And if you're worried about your horse consuming too much hay, if left with a hay buffet, use a slow feeder. Put some small whole hay nets on your round bales. Or give them small piles of hay and make little piles all throughout the pasture so that they're moving around, having to go from pile to pile. Because trust me, I understand it's not reasonable to sit a horse out in front of a bunch of hay and just let them eat till their heart's content. A lot of horses have weight issues. A huge amount of horses are overweight. I did make a video about this. If you want to check it out, I'll put a little card here. Next, addressing the grain situation. You're probably going to have to reduce the amount of grain that you're giving them. You might have to switch your formula completely to a grain that is lower in starch. Here's a neat little trick. Before you work your horse out, sometimes just giving them a little bit of alfalfa can help buffer the stomach so that they're feeling a lot more comfortable while you ride them. You should also consider maximizing turnout. Get your horse moving. If they're standing still, it slows gut motility, and you don't want a horse that has stomach ulcers to be sitting in a bath of stomach acid and digestive enzymes. Minimize your horse's stress when possible. Maybe this looks like giving your horse some mild sedation when they get trailered out. Maybe it means doing shorter workouts. Maybe it means competing less frequently or expecting a little bit less from your horse. Remember, when stress hormones increase, so does the stomach acid. You can also use omeprazole as a preventative measure. Make sure you discuss this with your veterinarian first. Don't just start giving omeprazole to your horse. But talk to your veterinarian. If this is a recurrent problem that your horse has, you might be able to give it as a preventative measure and not just as a treatment for when your horse is suffering. So, moral of the story, if your horse is acting different, don't automatically blame them. Consider ulcers, because that is probably the #1 cause for bad behavior in horses without an obvious cause. Because remember, horses do not wake up and decide to be difficult. I mean, maybe sometimes they do. I don't know. I think my horse does that sometimes. But seriously, if it's an extreme, sudden change, something's up. And with horses, pain can manifest as resistance. Ulcers are one of the most common and most frequently overlooked causes of discomfort in the horse. So talk to your trainer, talk to your veterinarian, and let's get this straightened out. So you might be sat wondering, what the heck should you be feeding your horse? Because a horse's diet doesn't stay the same from birth till, I won't even say it. A horse's diet is going to change depending on what their activity level is, any medical concerns they may have, what stage in their life they're at. And it can be a little tricky to determine what your horse should be eating and what they should not be eating. So I have devised a no-guess horse feeding guide to help you with this very issue. It consists of 4 flow charts. I love flow charts. I think they're a lot of fun. You just answer the questions, follow the prompts, and then it gives you a recommendation at the very end telling you what your horse might be better off eating. It also comes with a hay feeding guide and a grain feeding guide. So if you want to check that out, I will put the link in the description. The link is also in my bio, so happy feeding! If this video helped you, feel free to share it with someone when their horse mysteriously starts acting out, because sometimes it's not attitude, it's acid. It's Adri with her horse. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.